very useful to rapidly build homes for people. And that is the most toxic substance, one of them, to mankind. Everything is dangerous. Plus, over 4,000 people died from, the cancer caused by asbestos. But all asbestos is dangerous to your health. The fibres that will lodge in your pleura and kill you are so small, they're under 3 microns. Australia's greatest industrial disaster, industry that created the problem. It's bonded next to the iron ore, all through the Pilbara, down near around out Kalgoorlie, out that way, Mount Keith. Western Australia has the highest rate of asbestos cancers per city in the world. India is such a huge consumer of asbestos. But the problem you have is there's so much money being made by the people that are mining and manufacturing. They are pushing back very hard, putting out false scientific evidence. Our schools were so contaminated with asbestos. Tall building on Curtin University, down studios where the music used to be played on the ABC. What we can count about just over 6 million tonnes of asbestos in our built environment. Targeted approach to remove all of that. Earliest we could do it would be 2068. It is estimated that 27,500 people will still die from asbestos. The war in Ukraine, 70% of roofs in Ukraine are asbestos. And the same thing within Gaza. It will be a human rights crisis in 20, 30 years for children and people growing up after these wars. The World Health Organization says we lose 200,000 people a year to asbestos-related diseases.
Welcome to Colours of Path, where we bring life stories together. My name is Yamuna and I am your host in this journey. Do you know, every year most of the Australians were killed because of asbestos, more than the accidents. And the frightening part is many people are living with asbestos without knowing it. Mostly in the house built before 1990. In the walls, bathrooms, wardrobes, everywhere. It's a mix of asbestos. Today we have very special person, Melita. We are learning how to handle asbestos and live the safe life in Australia. Let's welcome Melita in Colours of Path today. Welcome to Colours of Path.
Thanks, Yamuna, and thanks for having me. And I'm delighted to be here today. My name's Melita Markey. I'm the CEO of the Asbestos Disease Society of Australia. I'm also a director at the Institute of Respiratory Health. So I have a lot of involvement both at where we find at the beginning with naturally occurring asbestos to manufactured asbestos, and also to when we're dealing with people ill from asbestos-related disease and looking for the best treatments so we can save lives.
What asbestos are?
Asbestos is a naturally occurring mineral, and it comes in 2 types, what we call amphiboles and serpentines. Amphiboles are very hard, firm, fine, shard-like, and once they get into our body doesn't really have the ability to remove them. We also then have what we call the serpentines, which are softer and curlier, and when we absorb some of those through our body has a little bit of a better chance of processing them, removing some of it, but not all of it. So when we say to people, when you inhale asbestos or absorb asbestos in some form of way, it's with you for life. And that's where the problem starts.
So do you mean that it cannot be removed at all?
No.
Once it's done, it's gone?
It's with you for life.
So when was it started?
The ancient Greeks and Romans used asbestos because it had such incredible qualities of protecting us from thermodynamic qualities, they call it. So fireproofing, fire retardant. So it was a very long history for use by mankind. But really, when we started to industrialise more, and we needed, say, large ships with boilers to protect the ships from the heat and stopping fire, and even with the great fires in New York and those areas, asbestos was seen as a miracle product to stop fires spreading. So that's where it emerged. And then after the Second World War, it was seen as very useful to rapidly build homes for people. So they were creating asbestos sheeting, the hardy sheeting, and they were able to rapidly put up homes. And there were a lot of different products that were developed to build housing after the Second World War.
So which were the first countries to use the asbestos?
Well, look, in terms of the first countries, it was very popular in America, UK, and all through now. Probably the biggest user of asbestos now is Southeast Asia.
Is that? But some research said that Australia have a mining for asbestos.
Well, yes, Australia was very famous from the point of view that it mined the most rare asbestos. It only comes in two countries, South Africa and Western Australia, and that's blue asbestos, which is known as chrysidolite. That's its name. And that is the most toxic substance, one of them, to mankind.
So is
blue
that
asbestos.
The same asbestos which was used in the World War II to protect it from the fire? Or it's a different
It was a
one?
combination, depending. So Canada produces white asbestos. We also had a white asbestos mine in New South Wales, in Barrayugal. So that's where it gets a bit confusing for the public between white and blue asbestos. The World Health Organization says there's no safe form of any asbestos.
So everything is dangerous?
Everything is dangerous, but when you get down to, say, diseases, the highest prevalence of diseases are caused by exposure to what we call the amphiboles, which is blue, brown asbestos known as tremolite, or blue asbestos known as chrysidolite. And unfortunately for Western Australians, Lang Hancock found a fabulous deposit in the Hamersley Ranges. And at the time, they were looking in the Second World War to create filters for gas masks, for mustard gas. And again, the blue asbestos is so fine and easy to weave that it was mined and sent to the UK for the war effort to make gas mask filters. And the ladies who made those filters died from mesothelioma. Many died from manufacturing those. Yeah, the cancer caused by asbestos. Asbestos causes lung cancer, causes a very rare form of cancer called mesothelioma. And it also causes asbestosis, which is what we call a fibrosing of the lungs, scarring of the lungs, which all are very debilitating diseases.
So how long does it take when you are exposed to asbestos have a cancer?
Well, depending. So, for example, if you're working every day, say, for example, you're working at James Hardie in the 1950s, manufacturing all these wonderful, amazing sheets that put houses together and wonderful products, you know, a very short amount of time, maybe 10, 12, 15 years, because you're constantly breathing and you get scarring on your lungs, and that leads to asbestosis. You get shortness of breath, and then what we call obstructive airway disease. It becomes very difficult to breathe. So, and then most people end up on oxygen as they get older. It's a terrible disease, very debilitating, and affects their heart because you're not getting enough oxygen, and a whole range of areas. Then you have lung cancer. And so lung cancer, I think we're fairly familiar with lung cancer from smoking. If you smoke and have asbestos exposure, it has what we call a synergistic effect. It speeds up the process to developing an asbestos-related lung cancer. So again, what the specialists tell us, or the scientists tell us, it's anywhere between 30 to 50 years. But sometimes you can be 20 years because it's accelerated, because you've smoked or you've had a high exposure.
Yeah, high exposure.
But alternatively, when it comes to, say, chrysidolite, blue asbestos or brown asbestos, it really doesn't matter what type of exposure. You could have a lot of exposure working in the mines at Whitnum or manufacturing the blue asbestos, or alternatively, you could spend a short time in the town of Whitnum and still develop mesothelioma. There is no safe. It doesn't matter when they do testing with rats with blue asbestos, exposing them to it. They have never come up with a definitive range. So it is a very interesting difference, but all asbestos is dangerous to your health.
So if you look at the basic houses, so it says that the houses built before 1990 have asbestos. Right? Yes. So how does it really come to the houses? Was it cheap, or was it for the protection?
I think it was available. Oh. So that was, after the Second World War, it was very difficult to be manufacturing bricks. It's a very more complex process. And we were able to get people into homes faster, because if you think about, you've just got these lovely sheets, you bang up a frame and you knock the sheets and saw through them.
Instead of brick layering, you just put the sheets
fibro sheet walls. So you would have seen the old houses with the asbestos walls, or alternatively they build them and they put fibre planking on it so it looked like timber planking on the outside. Or if you go to seaside suburbs, which are now pretty much a part of Perth, but back 30 years ago, 40 years, a lot of them were just holiday areas like Falcon in Mandurah, Rockingham, areas around Rockingham down there, Medora Bay, all those areas, they were full of, and even if you head up north to Lancelin and Wedge Island, lots of asbestos shacks So people would go and build these holiday homes out of these shacks. And then as families expanded, oh, we've got another kid, we'll add another room.
Yeah.
It was easy.
True.
And so this is how it happened. And this is sadly how so many children were exposed and then went on to develop asbestos-related diseases as adults. So one of the things in my clinic is that we're seeing a lot of people that were exposed as children helping mum and dad build another room on the holiday house. Or helping dismantle an old shack to build a bigger, better one.
Yeah.
It was just so common. Back then, so we're taking 30, 40 years ago, people were working with asbestos extensively. Asbestos wasn't totally banned till 2000. Mm-hmm. So prior to that, there was a lot still in the building industry. People putting up fencing, people using it within the home. Exactly right. Very easy to get if you're a farmer. You need a new chook house, a new outhouse, a new shed.
Yeah.
Very easy to buy some sheeting and then bang it together or get it second hand from a recycling place back then in the 90s and before 2000. So it was so available, very easy to use. So in fact, people might not have been trying to save money. It was just faster.
It was faster,
We were trying
easy.
to get a builder.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my kitchen done at the moment. Forget it. Anyone out there who can help me with my kitchen, please. I need a new kitchen.
Yeah, cool.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was easy, fast, and you could do it yourself. So it wasn't necessarily about saving money.
That time might be people didn't know about the danger of the asbestos.
No, the challenge we have is there's a very big international debate, and that is in many countries, Russians still mine asbestos. The Canadians were mining asbestos. And India, huge asbestos, they import it. And so they're still very big customers. And so in Southeast Asia, and the Russians get very annoyed at asbestos campaigners internationally because they say, stop ruining our market. So it is a really big thing. So the Russians have slightly shifted now, and they now say, their hygienists now say, oh, it's that bad blue stuff that's dangerous. The white stuff's okay. So they've got a lot of debate now.
But both the white and the blue are dangerous.
They are. The World Health Organization, there's no safe level of asbestos. But we do know when we look at the disease statistics, we see more people with asbestos-related cancer, particularly mesothelioma, from their exposure to blue asbestos in Australia. But when you look at a worldwide scale, it's probably more so white asbestos because there's more of that available.
Yeah,
but when we're talking about Australia,
Western Australia,
or Australia as a whole, because what happened was our asbestos that we mined and manufactured in WA was shipped around the world and all over Australia because it was so sought after.
When we shipped it, we didn't know about this danger.
Well, look, there's an argument to say we should have known.
We should have known, but
because in the east, in the north of England, where all the industrial factories were and they're manufacturing and doing a lot of work with asbestos, the doctors and hygienists noted workers dying from asbestos exposure, and they were bringing safety levels, dust levels into factories in the 1920s and 30s. And so we had a very famous flying doctor, Professor Eric Saint, and he was a young doctor after the Second World War. He came to Australia to find his future after the Second World War, and he joined the Royal Flying Doctor Service here. He was in the Air Force in RAF in England after the Second World War. And he flew into Wittenoom to check people, as you do, into the different towns. And he wrote such a damning letter to the health department that was used in litigation many years later. He said the dust levels were so high in Wittenoom and the mine and the mill that he expected it to produce the most lethal crop of asbestos diseases in the world's literature, which it went on to do many years later. And he wrote to the health department, and then my father started all the early work to protect the rights of people when they started to get ill from this mystery disease. We didn't know what it was.
What it was,
Yeah, and he connected with Professor Saint, who had been on to a very illustrious career after his early days in the Royal Flying Doctor Service. He founded the first medical school here at UWA in Western Australia. So a very prominent gentleman. And he spent time with my father and helping prepare for the cases. and to give. He used to say, hurry up, get on with his cases. I can't live forever. I want to give my evidence. That's what he used to say.
Till that time, he didn't know about the asbestos cancer.
They knew. They knew. So saying there was enough evidence.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can't say if individuals knew.
Yeah, true.
Because you only know what your boss tells you, don't you?
That's true.
That's true. So we can't know what the training was at that time. But what we do know, in the world's literature at that time, in industrial hygiene literature, in medical literature, there was a knowledge that we should suppress dust, asbestos dust in factories and manufacturing. So that was known. Whether or not that was passed on to those companies or the managers in those companies, we don't know. But I do know that the courts in 1988 did find CSR negligent of the workers in Whitnam.
Yeah.
And therefore that opened the way for the first cases of compensation.
Tell me the story of Whitnam.
Whitnam's an interesting story.
They wiped the Whitnam area from the official map of Western Australia.
Yes, which I find, very interesting. There's no point in wiping something off the map because we've got Starlink, we've got Google Earth. You're always going to be able to see it. So people with determination, you cannot wipe something on the map.
Yeah.
And this is something that I was thinking about the interview today. It reminds me of that law in chemistry, that matter can neither be created or destroyed. And that's the same thing. We're trying to say that Whitnam, we can destroy it by taking it off the map. We can't.
Yeah.
We can't.
So physically we can't take it out.
So we have to be realistic about it.
True.
And I've had some interesting discussions with the Shire of Ashburton. They're not fond of me. I've said to them, you can't hide it. And the government, you need a memorial there to discourage we've lost over 4,000 people, and they're still dying from their experience at Whitnam. I've had 3 new cases of mesothelioma in my clinic in the last couple of weeks, and they're all from people that were either children in Whitnam or worked in Whitnam.
Oh, they are still alive?
Yes, but they're just developing. But for them, it's taken 50 years to develop. They're in that category, the range. But as I said, some people were much earlier. For example, children that were born in Whitnam, some of them succumbed at 27 years old. So their exposure was a lot, time period was a lot less, their latency period. So our physiology is different, but as young children, we're closer to the ground. We breathe faster, we respirate faster, therefore we can take in more fibre, leaving more fibre in our bodies to mutate. And as we're growing to it, it also interferes with that process, with the cells growing. So there's a lot of biological processes take place, and asbestos fibre interferes with that, causing mutations, which leads to cancer and asbestos diseases. Obviously, some people are more prone to it because they have those genes.
Yeah.
You read about families that have got a range of cancers developing in them for no real reason. And if you've got that gene and then you're exposed to carcinogens, it's a recipe for disaster.
It's easy to get it.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking at. So we always say to people the best way to keep safe is to avoid it at any cost. I read about this lady travelling with her daughter just recently, a blogger, and she said, I closed the windows and turned the vents off. I mean, the only way that you could even attempt to try and block is with a proper HEPA filter, proper masks, because at the end of the day, the fibres that will lodge in your pleura and kill you are so small, they're under 3 microns. The human eye can't see them. You only see them under electron microscope. So to think that you're turning the aircon vents off. I remember a silver chain nurse one day telling me she had a snake in her aircon vent. So if a snake can get in on a farm what hope have we got with, fibre under 3 microns? Hello.
So do you mean that if we travel to Whitnam, there is a chances to have...
Well, it's more that if you go into Whitnam, because with a lot of people that are actually going into Whitnam, the fences aren't stopping them. They go overland by 4-wheel drives. So yes, very much so. I've got people that have spent such little time in Whitnam, for example, with the Whitnam races. They might go there for a couple of days to a racing meeting. So the Whitnam races didn't end till 1991. So even though the town had long closed, the races were still meeting. There's a great racetrack there. It was very popular. So jockeys have died from a very short time being exposed to the dust in Whitnam, the fibres that are still there. Because remember, Whitnam is a toxic waste dump. the tailings from the mining and manufacturing process were just left everywhere. They were dumped around the schools. They were dumped in the playgrounds. They were dumped on people's driveways. They were spread across the town as dust suppression for the red dust.
So what does government do to stop it?
Nothing. They just ignore it. Well, it's 46,000 hectares. How do you police it? You need Tesla robots in a couple of years. I think that's the only way.
And people don't take it so seriously.
No.
That's
people are very naive. Yeah, people are very naive, yes. And they just don't know because they don't see what I see.
How long have you been in this profession?
Well, actually, I'm a little bit unusual in that my parents founded the organisation 50 years ago now, almost 50 years ago, and I was a child, so I grew up with it. And my father felt so much compassion for these workers because as a migrant worker himself, he immigrated here, he was tricked into going to Whitnam himself to work there. And he was told it was this place, it was fantastic, it would recognise his skills. And he spoke very little to no English, but he spoke 5 other languages. He always joked about it. He said, I spoke 5 languages and I just didn't speak English. Anyway, so he went there and they bonded you in those days. So they took away all your wages until you paid back the airfare, the rent for your room, your food and lodgings. And so you were effectively trapped. But he was very fortunate being a single man. In the single men's quarters, they used to play a lot of poker and he was pretty good at it. So he won quite a bit of money one night.
Yeah.
So he bribed the pilot £50 to fly him out of Whitnam to get him out of what he said was the dump of all dumps. Because he'd worked in mines in Europe as a mining engineer and he said you could eat off the floor of the mines. He could not believe the dust and the filth. He said it was just so unprofessional compared to what he'd worked with in Europe. So in his mind, he'd seen a high standard. Or what was a standard. He didn't know if it was high or low. But then he found a low standard when he came to Whitnam and realised that it wasn't for him and found a way to get out. But many people weren't in that position. You know, they had families, they moved there with families. And in fact, from all intents and purposes, talking to the families that lived there, it was a beautiful place to live. It was on the gorges there. It was a spectacular lifestyle, a lot of fun. The town was a great town. People really bonded. So the fact that it turned into Australia's greatest industrial disaster, the second in the world, is one of the great tragedies because when you talk to people who lived and grew up in Whitnam, it was a beautiful place to be. Well, now it's known as Australia's Chernobyl. And so the rest, and this is the whole thing that I struggle with sometimes, the rest of the world sees it for what it is.
Yeah.
But here in WA, we think if we just take the name off the
it's gone.
It's gone. So it is just one of the great... I think, one of the great examples of collective denial. Now, it is such an interesting view because I've got documents in my office that actually in the late 80s, early 90s, the government at the time wanted to build a resort at Whitnam. So they had plans drawn up for a beautiful resort. So that's how little they thought about the impact of all the deadly tailings everywhere.
Yeah. Government needs a huge amount of money to clear out asbestos. What's your view on this one?
Look, I think it's a very challenge. It's one of those things that we call a wicked problem, isn't it? And my view on the matter is I don't think there's truly a safe way to deal with the removal right now, but we do need to look at it because the tailings are getting into the waterways and travelling further. And with all the floods and you know how it works up in the Pilbara, get these huge sort of cyclones, lots of flooding, then it evaporates and then the tailings go down the stream, then it evaporates, they spread across the plain and then they blow around. So it is a real consideration. We really have to be thinking about it. But my view on it, and I was talking to a journalist in the UK, and I said we should have a competition, a huge $500,000 prize or something like that for a university and put it out to some of the smartest minds. How do we do it? There's a lot of research now about how we break down tailings, how do we break down their construction. I mean, they're incredible mineral, very difficult to do, but there must be a way to do it safely. We've got Tesla robots coming up in the next couple of years. Why do we have to send people there?
It could be robots.
It could be robots. So I think we need to put it out beyond WA. To think that we think there's the brain power here in Western Australia, we're kidding ourselves. We need to be going to MIT in the US. We need to be going to some of the greatest universities in the world. And I think an international prize, my personal view, is the way to do it, and to attract the best minds to solve the problem. We've got some interesting technology out there, and that's what we should be focusing on.
That's very true. Why should people risk their life, isn't it, when we have so much good technology coming around?
Why not be looking at, and unfortunately, when you're close to a problem like we are in Western Australia, it's easy to be very myopic about it. I think we have to put it out to the international community. But when we've taken Whitlam off the map and pretend it doesn't exist, it's a bit difficult to go, oh, by the way, we've got this invisible place that doesn't really exist, but we'd like you to help us solve the problem to clean it up. I mean, really, I think we have to be very direct about it and say we have this wicked problem, we need to solve it, but it doesn't always have to fall on government. And that's where I struggle, because it was industry that created the problem. And back then we didn't have the knowledge and the regulations to really manage it the way we do now. And so part of the issue is to really should be, as taxpayers, when we say government, people don't stop and think it's our money. Taxpayers.
It is.
And I don't see why my children should pay to clean up CSR mess. I think that the companies involved, and there are a number of companies involved, there's Hancock Processing, there's CSR, there's the Shire of Ashburton, there's the state government, they should all be equally paying a share
to clean up the
to solve the wicked problem, which is how do we get rid of the tailings? Because even, Yamuna, if we got a big shovel and buried them in the ground somewhere, it's not, as we go back to, that matter can be neither created nor destroyed. If we bury it, someone can still dig it up in the future. We have to find a way to neutralise it, those sharp fibres that lodge in our pleura, in our tummy, in our peritoneum. That's the issue. How do we neutralise that fibre?
Let's go back to the Whitlam story again. So that disaster occurred because of the mining.
Yes, mining and milling.
Think,
there were two operations there.
Do you think that if they never started mining, the asbestos won't be there?
No, because unfortunately, it's a naturally occurring asbestos is all through the Hamersley Ranges, the whole region. So we were never going to escape the impact of asbestos. Even now, with the mining companies looking for iron ore, it's bonded next to the iron ore.
Oh.
So when they drill and blast for iron ore, they are releasing asbestos fibre all through the Pilbara, down there around out Kalgoorlie, out that way, Mount Keith, all down through that area of Western Australia, the lower half of Western Australia. So it is so prevalent in our mineralogy. So we were never going to escape the impacts. What made Whitlam so special is that they mined and milled it, and that's all they did. They just focused, chucked the iron ore that way and kept the asbestos
this way.
So it's all about what was important at the time because of the war effort, because they were lagging all the boilers in the ships, the warships. So a lot of our blue asbestos went to an area called Barrow-in-Furness in the north of England, very north of England, where there's big shipbuilding yards, and they have the highest rate of asbestos cancers per population for a town. Western Australia has the highest rate of asbestos cancers per city in the world.
Oh, wow.
In the world. So because of the sheer penetration of blue asbestos in this state, in our building materials, in our manufacturing, and because of Barrow-in-Furness, so much was shipped there because it was such a fantastic barrier for heat and fire retardant.
What about the houses built after 1990?
Well, it depends on if you're... look, we're reasonably comfortable if it's built by a building company, but if it was maybe an old farmhouse and someone recycled some old materials, or there's so many people out there that probably might have gone to a salvage yard and put up their own fence and might have used second-hand asbestos to put up their fence. So, again, we use that as a benchmark.
Yeah.
You should always check, particularly if you're buying in an older area or a country town, or the person was a bit of a do-it-yourself person. You've always got to keep your eye out. So we set these as benchmarks, but it's not the absolute.
But not everyone is aware of asbestos.
No, not at all.
That's another issue again, right?
And I remember you talking to me about new migrants to Western Australia.
Yes, mostly new migrants, they would buy the old houses and trying to renovate themselves.
But also old houses also occur in some of the most expensive suburbs of Western Australia, let me tell you. So you can go and buy a beautiful old home in Netherlands and have it riddled with asbestos because of the era, the eaves, behind the tiles. But one of the things, I was talking to one of the federal members, and he was chatting to me. He's got a lot of migrants in his new immigrants in his electorate, and saying that we should have some more information on our websites in other languages. So I did report that back to the government and asked them to do that, and they are looking at putting more information in other languages because it's interesting because India is such a huge consumer of asbestos, massive. Now, yep. Or the Russians sell it to India. It's a big international problem. And there's campaigners in Indonesia now that are really pushing back.
Isn't that a World Health Organization stop it exporting to the different countries?
The World Health Organization does a tremendous job. They've got a lot of information available, and they've even encouraging countries to have a strategic plans to eliminate asbestos. But the problem you have is there's so much money
on it
being made by the people that are mining and manufacturing. They are pushing back very hard, putting out false scientific evidence to say that it doesn't harm you.
What is the most common,
in products? Well, I guess one of the things that you wouldn't know is a lot of asbestos was used, again, in lagging on pipes, particularly pipes that in the roofs, ceiling spaces that might carry hot water or different products, or even in hospitals, those pipes are all lagged for insulation. And over time, the bonded cement that holds the fibres in place deteriorates and creates dust, and it falls down. So there's been
as time passes.
So you can be in a building, say you could be in a gym.
Yeah.
And you've got lots of air pumping in because you're getting hot and you're running on your treadmill and you're respirating fast. And in the ceiling above you is deteriorating asbestos on pipes coming through the airways, and you're breathing it in and not knowing. You wouldn't see it. So this is the sort of, because the fibres are so small, the ones that harm you, you can't see. Again, drilling. You could say have some tiles in your bathroom, think it's safe, I'll put a nice shelf there, drill in, and not realising there's asbestos that they'd put there. An old wall might have been really deteriorated, too hard to put tiles on, so they would have put asbestos sheeting over it and then tiled over that. How would you know? And this is the really big challenge that we have. And we can document government buildings like that, but we can't document private buildings.
True.
So the big challenge we have now, I've been working with the federal government on this, they're looking at creating a heat map. So they can look at all the government buildings, local government buildings. Local government does their best. They try and do their best with this issue, recording all of the buildings that have asbestos in them. But we can't tell who the private buildings are. There's no legislation to compel to put their asbestos on a register. What does compel them is their insurance company.
Do you have any example?
Oh, there's many buildings. There was the very famous Midland Workshops. We talk about Midland. Yeah. That's where they used to build all the old trains in the early days.
Yeah.
That has a horrific death toll. They were all cleaned out, but they had a horrific death toll. And I'm still dealing with workers now that work there, did their apprenticeships, worked there for some time, that are developing asbestos-related diseases, as well as ladies that worked in the office. The dust came through into the office, and they've died from asbestos-related diseases. There was also a well-known lot of schools. Our schools were so contaminated with asbestos. So a lot of teachers have passed away from working in the schools. In the schools, in asbestos-demountable buildings.
It was before 1990.
Yeah, these are older buildings. You know, the very tall building on Curtin University used to be the business building. I'm not sure what they've turned it into now, but it was the tallest building on campus. It used to be the business building. Yeah. And they also had the radio station in there, and they had the lagging in there. Again, what we call, like you said, we were talking about the popcorn ceiling, the spray-on limpid asbestos. They'd spray it on. It was a fantastic soundproofing. And so we had it in the Countdown studios where the music used to be played on the ABC. And over time, it deteriorated and used to drop asbestos fibre, on people
itself.
Oh, yeah, it used to deteriorate. It would deteriorate if it wasn't well sealed. So some people would paint it and seal it in.
Does painting makes it?
Painting helps bond it together, and that was a solution put forward as they started to deteriorate, they said, well, look, the theory was you're better off leaving asbestos in situ rather than touching it because it's more harmful if you remove it. And so it was suggested that people seal it.
After painting, how long it's secure for?
Well, it just depends on what it's exposed to, how long it lasts, deteriorates, because remember, it's exposed to the elements. So if it's being rained on, heat, hail, whatever's happening to it in the environment is how long the paint or sealing lasts. You just don't know. It's an unknown question. So the new belief now is we should be focusing on safe removal, because some asbestos is coming to 100 years old in some places. Mm-hmm. And the cement bonds are crumbling and just releasing what we call friable fibre. So it's very old. My father also had the belief that if we also invested in medical research, that the point sort of is moot, because if we could treat asbestos diseases, well, maybe we'd still obviously want to get rid of it, because nobody wants to get an asbestos-related disease and lose half a lung in, say, lung cancer for something that might have to resect a lobe to get rid of a tumour or what have you. You don't want them. The disease is a huge health burden, the cost of treating these diseases. So if you want to keep it simple, obviously you have a joint strategy of treatment and removal.
Yes.
So part of the podcast today coming in here is to actually, we really support a strategy, my organisation, of, a very careful removal, well-funded, supported removal with well-trained professionals. But we also equally say we must have investment in treatment, medical research for treatment and support of people, for the simple reason, even if we had a targeted approach to remove what we can count about just over 6 million tonnes of asbestos in our built environment. If we had a targeted approach to removal of that and the funding, the earliest we could do it would be 2068. And in that time, it is estimated that 27,500 people will still die from asbestos-related disease.
Yeah.
So why should those people be collateral damage? They shouldn't. Mm-hmm. There's only one government really focuses, and that's New South Wales. They really care about people and want to save lives. We have the highest incidence in this state. We're lucky to get $1. So my view is we can't go around denying it.
And removing the place.
Well, yes, that's it. Yeah, we're removing the names. That's not a solution. We have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it smartly.
Could be.
And that's why we need to put the problem out to the international community to get help. We need to focus on investment in research, medical research. That's why I'm a director of the Institute of Respiratory Health. We've just recently got together with a whole lot of other people working in lung health. So we've got dust disease, we've got a whole range. We've got cystic fibrosis, we've got a whole range of children's asthma. We've got a lot of... Lung health is huge.
It is.
If you can't breathe, you can't live.
Breathe, yeah.
And yet for some reason, we ignore it in our research funding. So now we've gone all together, all the different areas of lung health. We've worked together to put in a joint submission to government to say, please put some money into lung health. And then between us, we can put some into dust diseases, we can put some into asthma, we can put into childhood lung diseases, adult diseases. But we must look at, because breath is life. It is critical to who we are as a society to focus on lung health and making sure our citizens can breathe. And so that's where I feel so strongly about it. That's why I'm so involved on the health side as well as the industrial side, working with people in our organisation to help with their access to fair and just compensation, but also advocating for the fact that they shouldn't have to die from these diseases.
Yeah.
We should have a treatment, and also making sure we protect the next generation, because what people don't understand is that we have teenagers and young people with mesothelioma now because of the failure to deal with it, the legacy asbestos.
How can we avoid this?
Well, there's a couple of ways. Obviously, the most important way is don't get exposed, because once you're exposed, you can't take it back.
But it's not our fault that we get exposed.
And
it's
many
unknowingly
times,
exposed.
Yeah, many times it's not our fault. It's just we don't know. We get caught. We think it won't happen to us. It's only just, one little effort.
Yeah.
Why would I bother calling someone in? But unfortunately, our 3-year-old is right nearby running around, and you pop her in a playpen while you move that piece of dodgy asbestos, or you saw something, they inhale fibre, and 50 years later they're coming into my office with an asbestos-related disease from that exposure. And that's real. It's not an exaggeration. That's not an uncommon story for my work. So this is where we have to say we must avoid it. We must get more education out there and really put some really good videos and information on our website. So we are talking to government now, very much encouraging them to do that, because we've got great examples in New Zealand and great examples in Queensland.
With the website operating.
With their websites and videos and help for consumers and the public, and not just workers. We've got stuff for workers here, but nothing really good for consumers, and it's very hard to find. So that's a very important part of the work coming up. But the other part is investing in research and treatment. How do we better protect ourselves? How do we treat it when we do have an exposure? And how do we do early intervention so we can prevent diseases from actually getting a lot worse? So, for example, people can be diagnosed with mesothelioma just on fluid. The tumour has not yet formed, but we do not know how to interrupt that process to stop the tumour from forming. We know that person, as soon as we find the mesothelial cells in what we call fluid in their lungs, we've drained fluid off their lungs, they've had what we call a pleural effusion and their lungs filled with water. So we drain that fluid out, and we look in under the microscope and we find mesothelial cells. So we know that person has mesothelioma, but we don't have a tumour yet. We can't find that telltale sign. So, but what we do know is that will eventually develop into a tumour. How long? Depends on the person's physiology. It could take 1 year, 5 years, 6 years, but we cannot stop that person from dying from mesothelioma.
So do you mean that so far we haven't got any of the technology to stop it in between?
No, because we've never invested a lot in it, because at the time it was considered that a worker's disease. If we had babies dying from this, I think we might have a better approach. Or wealthy businessmen, we might have a lot of money donated. So I think the challenge is it's considered a worker's disease, therefore not given a high priority. Asbestos-related diseases are not classified under the public health system. They're still classified as occupational diseases. So if you say it's a public health matter, there's no funding in the public health budget, because asbestos-related diseases are seen as occupational, industrial diseases, and therefore the view is it should be funded by industry.
Oh.
But if the industries no longer exist, where is the money coming from?
So the health department doesn't look at
No, there's no budget. They see budget as a public health awareness.
Yeah.
So they'll put some money into awareness.
Awareness, but not the treatment.
No, which is very, very frustrating.
And we know that WA is the largest.
Yes, and we know that because we've got such a high penetration of blue asbestos in our building materials, in our office buildings, there's so much exposure going on, even now, even in government buildings. So I guess that's another part of the problem too. The irony of it is, if you could take it from just a business perspective, an insurance point of view, insurers would actually prefer there was less denial and a focus on it, because it would save insurance companies money. So really, we really need the insurance companies to come out and say to the government and industry, how about pulling your finger out and investing, because we're going to put your premiums up. And sometimes that's the only way to change behaviour, is to have a financial impact. It's not about appealing to the goodness of people or the better nature. They don't really care that. I'm sure individuals care.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
But the collective organisational belief isn't. But it's a flawed thinking, because from a point of view of saving money from litigation, saving money for insurance companies for compensation, and the health burden, the cost to the health system is massive. Just by taking a more proactive approach would save billions. I'm optimistic from the point of view there's a lot of opportunity to fix it. You've just got to come and spend more time with people like me. I'll set you straight.
So is that only your organisation doing this, or there are other organisations in WA?
Now our organisation is the one that leads this area in lobbying and stuff. But we work very closely with other stakeholders in unions. The Collective Union Trades and Labour Council, we work with research institutions, and nationally, again, with national organisations, national unions, national research institutions. There's a whole collective group of people working towards this, but there's still a real failing in understanding the need to commit to saving lives through research. And one of the things that I feel so strongly about in pursuing this area is because there's countries like Indonesia and Laos and Vietnam which are so impacted by asbestos and asbestos disease, but the diseases still aren't recognised.
No.
They've only just got it in their Industrial Act in Indonesia. They've recognised the first case of asbestosis. And so there's a huge amount of people getting sick, but it's being seen as TB and other lung diseases, which suits the companies. They don't like it being acknowledged. And I met an asbestos campaigner from Laos, and they think her mother has the diseases, so we're looking at it here in Sydney, in Australia, to try and help her mother. There's a lot of people, and if you think about the war in Ukraine, 70% of roofs in Ukraine are asbestos. So there's all that destruction and all the children, walking around breathing in all this fibre from all this destruction and demolition, plus a lot of silica from all the brick dust. And the same thing within Gaza. It will be a human rights crisis in 20, 30 years for children and people growing up after these wars, because they're being exposed to very high levels of asbestos dust and silica dust. So I think just from that, with our capabilities and our knowledge and our skills, we've got such brilliant scientists here. There's no reason why we couldn't, from a humanitarian, not just for our own selfish reasons, for our population, but for countries around us. We could save so many lives, because it's going to take a long time to get those respective governments to catch up and acknowledge those diseases. So if we can find a way to treat people
who already got the
disease or will be exposed, because it's going to be very hard to stop. And so why not try and focus on treatments that we can take to these countries and share and save lives, and taking it to the Ukraine and working in these countries in Gaza, because we will face a crisis in the future in those countries. We have such brilliant scientists here. We have AI. We have so much work happening internationally with cancer, with AI, with immunotherapy. Look, I think there has been probably the biggest shift. There's been two huge shifts in cancer treatment, and one is immunotherapy and the second is AI. I went to a cancer conference last year, a thoracic cancer oncology conference, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And it was AI. The data we were able to process that would take 3-4 years, we can do it in 6 months. So of course, when you're able to process, and we're talking huge amounts of data, we're looking at biomarkers in blood. We're looking at blood from, say, 4 or 5 different countries, and we can synthesize it together and look for those commonalities, what markers we can look to work with that tell us if we use this particular treatment in this person with this blood type or this age group or this genetic makeup or this ethnicity, we know that this type of drug will work better with them on this cancer. So that's the sort of stuff we can play around with AI now. AI is revolutionising drug treatment and drug development.
Hopefully we find something.
If we invest in it. The World Health Organization says we lose 200,000 people a year to asbestos-related diseases. Now you think about this conflict that's happening and the huge amount of exposure that's going on in the world, it's going to be a lot more. When it's not going away, we can't take it off the map.
Vietnam is now almost, it's not there. So what about the people living around Vietnam?
Well, it's interesting. There's some wonderful people living around Vietnam, wonderful First Nations people. The Banjima people are the traditional owners of Vietnam. But you also have the Indrabadi people, and they're very close by, and their water and land is affected because they're adjacent to Vietnam. And then you have the Inawonga people, and they're also heavily impacted as well, surrounding the area. They all have a lot of exposure. Our organisation works closely with them to test people. Nobody else bothered to test Indigenous people because nobody thought they existed either. You know what I mean?
I know.
They didn't have birth certificates until 1967. So my father went up there and talked to a lot of people in Onslow over 30 years ago and said, you need to be counted, you need to be checked. So we still do that work as well, working to check, and they are heavily impacted as well.
What does your organisation basically
Our organisation is very big, and I encourage you to listen to a podcast on what we actually do. It's on our website, asbestosdiseases.org.au. But what we do a range of things. We have health checking services because the Public Health Department closed theirs back in 1990 for workers. So people who are concerned about exposure can join our long-running program and get tested. And we do breathing tests, spirometry, lung function testing, CT scans, and we track people that are at risk. Mm-hmm. We also advise people if they are developing a disease or have developed a disease, the best course of treatment and where to go, and we refer them on. We have doctors and nurses working at our organisation. People that are dealing with asbestos-related cancers, particularly incurable ones like mesothelioma, we then work very closely with treatment trials, because some of the way that people keep themselves going is they go on different treatment trials for new drugs. Yeah. It's a bit like doing Captain Kirk going into the unknown on Star Trek with treatment trials. And some people find they extend their life. So that's part of the work we do, treatment trials. We have support groups for people. We have widows and widowers groups. We have information sessions on different things available, managing your transition into dealing with a catastrophic diagnosis, supporting families. And then we also have our advocacy work, which is talking to you now about how we can better improve the situation, with medical research. We also look at the legal situation. The legal situation has been pretty terrible in Western Australia. We have some of the worst laws in workers' compensation, so we're working now on a project now. One of the things that my father did in the early days, in the early 80s, people were statute barred from seeking compensation for their asbestos-caused diseases from working in the Whitnam mine and mill because the statute of limitations on the diseases was only 6 years. Oh. So what he did was he lobbied the government at the time, and the government then changed the legislation to allow for dust diseases, the long latency period. Yeah. So that was the first step. We had to change the statute of limitations. So our organisation has had a huge history in law reform. So I say we do law reform, we do medical reform, medical research, we have treatment, we have a doctor and nurse on staff. We also recently opened a GP clinic, which is run separately, but it's enabling people to get better access and understanding with doctors who understand industrial diseases. So there's a lot of work that we do, a lot of work advocating, a lot of work working very closely with patients and supporting them on their journey. With the goal, of eventually helping them win their journey.
The last advice you want to give as an asbestos disease specialist?
I think the single most important thing is you can't take an exposure back. So the safest thing to do is not have it. Don't expose your children, don't expose yourself. And if you are put in that situation, take yourself out of it as soon as possible and get professional advice.
If someone is doing house renovation and they
accidentally
drilled it.
Most important thing with asbestos is dust suppression, and that's not getting a vacuum cleaner out. That's the worst thing you can do. The best thing you can do is put a damp cloth on it, wet it with a hose wherever you are, just dampen it down, then get out of the room, seal it up so you don't go back in there, and call the professionals in to professionally decontaminate it. It is really important because you don't know, number one, how much asbestos is there. There is no safe level, and it's just not worth the risk because people find it very difficult to see 30 years ahead or 50 years ahead. Yeah. But we meet these people and we meet their children. And I can't tell you the devastation of a parent knowing that they've exposed their child of an incurable disease. So don't put yourself in that position. And as I said, we're here to help you at my organisation at any stage and give you advice. We're working very closely with government to improve the information that they have and easy access. But we also have a lot of access on our website. We take you to New Zealand website, we take you to the Queensland websites, and that's something that I believe we need to remedy here in Western Australia, and working very hard that we have, you know, the best investment in research. We have the best information available, and we take the matter very seriously and look to the future about how we can have an asbestos-free future. We can have great treatment, because unfortunately there's so many people being exposed inadvertently because they don't have the information. So with a bit of like Yamuna's work, as a new person,
no idea,
having no idea and suddenly discovering it, and with your absolute desire to find out more information, someone like yourself can actually do so much good than we could ever do with our, you know, websites and ads, because you've got a fresh view on it and you know how to talk to younger people and let them know.
I'll try my best.
Yeah, so I think you're probably going to be our best weapon, Yamuna.
Oh, thank you. What's the myth about asbestos?
You'll be right. She'll be right.
Yeah.
She'll be right. That's probably the biggest myth.
What does the WA local government should be doing to avoid the asbestos?
Well, look, local government makes a huge effort. Remember, we have 3 tiers of government: federal, state and local government. Local government has sort of been left holding the baby with the asbestos issue. Again, it goes back to the people that created the mess, the companies, the manufacturers, and we should be calling on them to assist and fund the costs of creating tips. It's very expensive to remove asbestos. It's becoming very expensive. So one of the things that the government's been looking at is federally is how do we help homeowners, maybe through the tax system. There's a rebate. How do we help local government helping fund extra tips and services for, because one of the things we talk about removing the problem, but where do we put it?
True.
And this is one of the challenges again. So we've got to create special places where we can bury it effectively.
And it's a natural occurring, so...
Well, it's naturally occurring if you keep, you know, and the challenge we have now in mining is we're exposing workers through the drilling and blasting and air quality up there.
One of the industry used the asbestos for cigarette filter?
Yes, that's a very interesting story. We had a court case actually running many years ago, and one of the sources of evidence was the asbestos in the tips, the filters.
Filter tips,
And Kent cigarettes was known for it. And we put a message out to our members in our newsletter, in our organisation, and one of our members was a collector of cigarettes and an unopened packet of Kent, which he donated. And they were able to prove, because no one could find, because it's from the 1950s. And so, one of our members had an amazing cigarette collection and unopened packets and brought it in and donated it. So yes, we can unequivocally say it was in filters because we proved it through one of our members. We have a fascinating collection of documents, products that you wouldn't even think about. The old science gloves in science labs. They used to wear asbestos gloves, putting in things inside ovens and testing and all sorts of things. And a lot of science teachers and scientists passed from asbestos-related diseases from using asbestos gloves, asbestos mats with Bunsen burners. So they're quite prevalent in schools until the early 1990s. And again, because of teachers becoming ill and then taking these cases to court to mitigate risk. And there's some good people working on it. We have the Federal Asbestos Eradication Agency. They're working very hard on strategies to try and improve this situation, and we work closely with them to support their work. And the challenge again we have is each state works separately. So there's nothing, if we develop a whole of government approach, there is still nothing to compel individual state governments to participate. So again, there's lots of challenges, and it's people power. If people say they've had enough, they need to write to their local member and say, please help with the funding to remove asbestos, help us with the costs, help us with dealing with this legacy. And of course, the main manufacturer was James Hardie. Let's get them to tip more money into the problem that they created.
It's a hard job.
It's a hard job.
But we have to do it.
You have to do it. And we need to get young people like yourself to do it, because I don't believe you, as taxpayers, should be responsible for a company who made so much profit and are still making huge profits. They just donated $10 million to the NRL in Sydney to sponsor them. So if they can afford to spend $10 million sponsoring the football in New South Wales, why can't they spend $10 million on helping us with research here in Western Australia, or helping with some of the removal issues, or helping build a big tip for West Australia? There's lots of options, and we just need to be putting pressure on those who can do it. They've got the money, the capability, and they're responsible. And young people should be saying, we shouldn't be paying for it. You're going to have such a big tax bill. You're going to be left paying for aged care. Yeah. You're going to be left paying huge money for houses, and you're going to be left paying for the asbestos bill. Young people need to get up and say, no, we're not paying. We are not paying. You didn't do it. Why should you inherit the bill?
Yeah.
And you need to send a very clear message to say, we're not paying your bills from the past. Exactly what you said, you know. We should be looking at the future, but we shouldn't be asked to be paying for it. What are the strategies to share the costs?
Yeah.
It really should be an economic discussion around sharing the cost and not leaving it to the next generation to pay for it. It's not right. I feel very strongly about that. We shouldn't be leaving you with the legacy asbestos. We shouldn't be leaving you with the cost of it. And we should be leaving you with great treatments and also to assist our neighbours. That's what we should be leaving behind for the next generations. So that would be my absolute final say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming and talking so much about the asbestos. And I hope everyone is a little bit aware about this. If you guys still want to know more about the asbestos and how it affects our health, then you can contact her or either me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amina. It was lovely.